Daf Mem Amud Aleph will begin Lamed Tes Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. We learned previously that there was a case where there was a deer that was hunted, it was trapped on the first day of Yontiv, and then on the second day of Yontiv, Rosh Hashanah didn't want to eat from it. So, because apparently he held that even Shnei Yom Tov Shel Golius, we consider it to be Kedusha Achas. And we don't say that it's a Sofek and that if the previous day was Kodesh, today is Chol, or if the previous day was Chol, today is Kodesh. We consider Kedusha Achas, and he refused to eat from it. And we asked a kasha from him that we see, and not that way, that we see that it says clearly that the Brisa says that Meider of Yesi, B'shnei Yom Tov Shel Golius, that the 2 days of Golius are considered to be 2 Kedushas, and the second day, therefore, would be Muter. So it was a kasha on what he held, when Rav Sheshes held. Now the Gemara is going to bring a different version of that incident. Amar Rav Ashi says, Meir said that case, the case of the deer, love it's due to its did. It was not a case where it was captured. It was brought by Nachrim outside the Tchum. And the question wasn't for the next day, the question is for that day. It was brought by Nachrim Mechutz L'Tchum, and the question was, for that very same day, is it mutter? Do we consider it that therefore they brought it for the Yisrael, and if a Nachri does a malacha, or he does an Isser for the Yisrael is not allowed to partake from it. Zaman the Achal Savra, the ones of Nachman B'chitza that ate from it, they held it was mutter. What did they hold? They hold about Bishul Yisrael Zeh mutter li Yisrael Acher. They held that even though the Nachri bought it for a year, but that person that they brought it for cannot partake from it till after Yontiv. He can't get he can't get a benefit from the Isra that was done on Yontiv. But a different Yid that was not done for him could. Uman Achal Savar, the one that didn't eat it, Rosh Hashanah, he held, called Asla Beiresh Galusa, Daitakul Rabban, and Asi. He said it's not a case of that it was brought for one Yisrael, that a different Yisrael can eat from it, because if it's brought to the house of the Reish Galusa, it's brought for everybody. So it's considered that it was brought for him as well. So that's why it's also. Frankly, the Gemara, how could you say that that's the version of the Maisa, because Va'ashkei Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbar Shmuel of Amalei. But we said in that case, we said that on that Maisa, Rosh Hashanah, that came upon Rabbi Bar Shmuel, and he asked him whether he heard anything about the Shnei Yom Tovim of Golius, about the 2 Kedushas of Golius. Now, therefore, the Shaila, and the reason he brought this must have been that it involves the Shtei Yom Tovim Shel Golius, where they consider Kedusha Achas Shtei Kedushas. Now, according to the version that was just presented, it has nothing to do with that. He says, Lo Yad Dvarim Olam. He said that conversation never happened between Rosh Hashanah and Rabbi Bar Shmuel. It never happened, and therefore it was not Negeya at all about the 2 Kedushas of Yontiv or not. It's completely separate Shaila. If that something is brought to the house of the Reish Galusa, is it considered to be brought specifically to the Reish Galusa or to all of the Yidden, and therefore none of them could partake from it. So continuing on with this inyan, if a Nachri brings something for a Yid or does a Isser for a Yisrael. Hahu lifted, there was a turnip to also Mechuza that was brought by a Nachri to the town of Mechuza. Nafak Rava Chazir the commission. Rava saw that it was already withered. So Sham Rava Lemizmena. So Rava said that it was mutter for the people to buy it. In an Eifin that it's mutter to buy on Yontiv, he said it's mutter to buy it because it must have been picked from the day before. Amar Havadim Yasmon Nekra. It was certainly picked from the day before, so therefore it's mutter. Why should you say, why possibly would you say that it's also? That it was brought from outside the Tchum, so meaning it was brought today from outside the Tchum. Maybe it was picked yesterday, but it was brought from outside the Tchum today. So what we would say, also, but still, but it was brought for a specific Yisrael, another Yisrael, different Yisrael, it's mutter to eat from it. But Kolshkein high, and certainly high, that the Nachrim also, that the Nachri over here in this case didn't bring it for any specific Yisrael, and he didn't even bring it for Yidden, he brought it to the market, he brought it for Goyim. So therefore, it's mutter. But Kevin the Chazadka Marshe Omaisalu, but when he saw that they were bringing extra, once after the psak of Rava, he saw that the Nachri is bringing more, he was bringing extra ones, Asalu, he said it was also because over here, now it's considered that it's brought for a Yisrael. And meaning it's brought for Yisrael, and it's not brought for a specific Yisrael, it's brought for all the Yisrael, so therefore none of them could have partake from it. So Taisus explains that that's not what it says, that he said it wasn't picked today. Originally he saw that it was withered. It was not fresh, so it wasn't picked today. Therefore it was picked yesterday. Therefore he held it would be mutter. And therefore it's mutter. Now, but if it was picked today, why would it be also? If we, in the Havamina, we were assuming that even if it was brought mechus l'tchum, that it wasn't brought for the Yisrael, it was brought for the Nachri, so if it was picked today, then also it would have been picked for the Nachri and not for the Yisrael. So why should it be Aser? Taisus explains, if it would be picked today, it would be Aser, not because of the Malachut Kaitzer, it would be Aser because it would be Muksa. Something that was attached to the ground today, so it's Muksa. Even if we say that the Goy is picking it, he would pick it for a different Nachri, not for Yisrael. So it would be Muksa. The Ritva said it would be also because it would go into the Gzeir of Peres HaNashim, that things that fell off a tree are also because the Gzeir might come to pick it from the tree. Here also he might come to take it and cut it down. But he saw it was withered, so he said, therefore, it must have been picked yesterday. It's not Muksa. And there's no Gzeir of Peres HaNashim, it was picked yesterday. Maybe it came mechus l'tchum. He originally said it's mutter because it didn't come. It wasn't brought for a Yisrael. It was brought to the market for a Nachri. Once after the Hatcher, he saw they were bringing more. Therefore, they're bringing it specifically for Yisrael. And there's no one Yid in particular that they're bringing it for. They're bringing it for all Yidden. Therefore, it's awesome. Hanu b'nei Ganana, the Gozalo Wasbiyam Tosheni, the people were making a canopy, and they cut down the Hadassim, the branches were cut down by the Nachrim on the second day of Yom Tov. So L'urta Shorle Ravina. So therefore they were cut down on Yom Tov. Israel cannot get hanaf from it, it cannot partake from it, but immediately after that evening, Ravina said that it's mutter, you can smell from it, you can get hanaf from it right away. So Lorta Sharla Ravina Lo Ruchabel Alter. He permitted smelling from right away. Now normally we say if a Nachri does something for a Yisrael, he does a Malachar, something also for Yisrael, you can't partake from it, and you have to wait until after Shabbos or after Yom Tov b'chdei sheyasa. What's the definition of b'chdei sheyasa? So according to Rashi, it's the time it takes, he cut down these hadassim, the time it takes to cut them down. According to Taisus, it's not only the cutting down, it's the cutting down and bringing it. You can't get hanoah from the davar also that the Nachri did for the Yisrael, so normally it would have to wait the amount of time that it would take to, if he would wait after Yom Tov, the amount of time it would take starting and finishing after Yom Tov, and only then after that period of time you can get hanoah. But here he did not require that. So Amalei Rabbi Barat HaChlifa Ravini said to him, Leiser Lamar. He said, you should answer them. Meaning, what was the reason to matter it? Why did we say over here, why was he matter it? He was matter it because he was mekel, and it was a yont of sheni, the Rashba explains, it was a yont of sheni, therefore he was mekel. He didn't impose this requirement that we normally have, that b'chdei sheyasa, because of yont of sheni. However, the taina was that Rabbi said to him, Rabbi Tachlifa said to him, you should answer in this case because they're not b'nei ter, b'nei shein b'nei ter, and if you're mekel, they'll be maker more, they'll be mezalzel, so you should answer in this case. Maskevla Rav Shmai, he said, time b'nei ter, The only reason that you're saying that you should answer because they're not Talmid Chacham, Habenei Torah Shari. But if they were the Talmid Chacham, you'd say it's Mutter V'Habim B'Chdei Sheyasa. You need a B'Chdei Sheyasa. It's always required that you wait B'Chdei Sheyasa, and even though it's Yontav Sheni, you do need B'Chdei Sheyasa, even on Yontav Sheni, just like on Yontav Rishon. You need B'Chdei Sheyasa, even if they're Talmidei Chachamim, you would have to wait the required time and that it would take to do this malacha or do this isser and to bring it to the Yid. He can't get any hana from what was done on Yontav for that. You'd have to wait the amount of time it would be required to do this if he started and completed it after Yontav. So in the Mishnah we learned that Rav Daisa says that the Shaliach Tzibur in Rosh Hashanah, he says in the Tefillah, we treat it according to Rav Daisa as a sofek, and therefore he's the one who is mispal. He says in the Tefillah, he says, so he mentions in the Tefillah, he mentions Rosh Chodesh. He also mentions Rosh Hashanah, he mentions Rosh Chodesh, but he makes it tonight. So there's 2 points that Rav Daisa is saying over here. He says, number one, that you mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah. And also, he treats Rosh Hashanah as a sofek. So he says, if today is really Rosh Hashanah, he says, he says today, if it is really Rosh Hashanah, and if not, then you should be tomorrow. Then you should do it tomorrow. So he says, therefore, he says, strengthen us, im hayayim, whether it's today or whether it's tomorrow. And on the next day, he says, fortify us, whether today's Rosh Hashanah or if it was yesterday. So, first point he makes is that you have to mention Rosh Chodesh. The second point that he mentions is that you mention it all tonight. If it's today, then give us this bracha today. Or whether it's today or tomorrow. And the next day he mentions whether today is Rosh Hashanah or whether it's yesterday. So he asked the question, do we hold this way? Do you mention Rosh Chodesh and Rosh Hashanah? Do we say Kevin the Chalukim b'Musafin Amrina? Do we say that since Rosh Chodesh has a separate Korban Musaf, different than Rosh Hashanah, therefore Rosh Chodesh should be mentioned? Or do we say that no, the Torah refers to both of them in the mentioning of a zichron, a remembrance, and therefore as long as we mention a zichron, it's oil lakan. It should be for both days. So that was a shadow. So he answered, Omerle Tenisua, we learned Rav Daisa Aimer, Aivil Bnei Teva. So it says, Rav Daisa says that you mention Rosh Chodesh, and it says that the Chachamim argue. So my love lahaskir. So when the Chachamim, what did the Chachamim argue on? Is it not that the Chachamim argue and say you don't mention Rosh Chodesh? That they say that Zikaron or Lakan, that the remembrance applies to both of them, and therefore you don't mention Rosh Chodesh, and therefore we would hold like the Chachamim and don't mention Rosh Chodesh. He said no, loy lahasnes. Maybe I'll tell you really that they also agree that you have to mention Rosh Chodesh. That's not the point of the argument. They also agree that you mention, but what they disagree with is lahasas, to make a condition, to say if today is Rosh Hashanah, whether it's today or tomorrow, and the next day whether it's today or yesterday. That they say that you shouldn't mention because we treat it as kedusha achas, we don't treat it as a safek, and we're not mezalzel in the days of Rosh Hashanah, and therefore they say you don't mention whether it's today or tomorrow, but you should, and nevertheless, mention Rosh Chodesh. And Hachinam Mistaber, it's more likely to say that the Brisa says V'chain Hayir of Daisaisa, Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah. He says, and Rav Daisa similarly said in the Rosh Chodesh of the entire year. So therefore, is if you say that the point of contention is lahasna, whether you make the condition, and Rav Dais is saying you make the condition not only Rosh Hashanah, you make it on every Rosh Chodesh, on every 2-day Rosh Chodesh. When Rosh Chodesh is 2 days, so whether it's the 30th day of the previous month or the first day of the next month, and you make the same type of condition whether today is really Rosh Chodesh or tomorrow. So therefore I understand why the Chum didn't agree. Eli Amr Lahaskir, if you're only saying to mention it, of course they would be moided to him. Because certainly during the course of the year would have to mention Rosh Chodesh. So it must be that the machlekes is lahasles. So don't you see clearly that that's the point of the machlekes? Now, as the way the Ritva explains it, that l'chera, that's true, it's clear that there's no question that as far as the rest of the year in Rosh Chodesh, the issue is lahasles. But he says that they argue because they say it's not a raya on Rosh Hashanah, because perhaps on Rosh Hashanah they would say that the issue is to mention. The rest of the year, Rosh Chodesh of the rest of the year, the issue is whether it's lahasnes. So it's not a raya necessarily that that's also the issue by Rosh Hashanah. It could be that on Rosh Hashanah it's not only a question of lahasnes, could be it's also a question even to Maskir. But Al Kolpanim, his raya was that, you see, that if during the rest of the year the issue is lahasnes, therefore that was also the issue, the machlekes on Rosh Hashanah in the Mishnah was a question of machlekes v'lahasnes. What are you going to say? Lahasnes. Well, if it is lahasnes, so why does he have to mention it also in Rosh Chodesh, on 2-day Rosh Chodesh? L'chera would be the same issue. When it says stricha, no, you have to mention it in both cases. Stricha. Diashmin in Rosh Hashanah, if you only told me Rosh Hashanah, Havamin, I would have said, Bahai, Kamri Rabbanan, Deloy, I would say only on Rosh Hashanah the Rabbanan say, you don't make the Tanai, you don't say whether it's today or tomorrow, or today or yesterday. I would have said over there, Havamin, Bahai, Kamri Rabbanan, Deloy, Mishum Dasal Zazulabe, because if you make a condition on Rosh Hashanah, so people might be mezalzel with it, and treat it lightly. Oh, maybe one day is really Kaidish, one day is Chol. We're not sure if one day is really Yontiv, so they won't treat it with the severity and the Chumrah of a Yontiv, with the Kedusha of a Yontiv. So that's why the Chacham argue and say, don't make a condition. But every Rosh Chodesh on the rest of the year, the entire year, where it's not a question of a Yontiv, of a Yom Kodesh, and it's not a question of being Mazalzel in a Yontiv, I might have thought that Chomer might have Rav Daisa. And if it only told me Rosh Chodesh, I would say Baha Chomer Rav Daisa. Then over here Rav Daisa says you make it tonight, because there's not a question of being Mezalzel. Aval Bahach, in the question of Rosh Hashanah, Rabbanan, I might say that he'd be Moed the Rabbanan that you don't make it tonight, because also Lazel Zuze Be Tzricha. So therefore it's needed. Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. Rosh Hashanah, Shechali is B'Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, Beis Shammai Oimrim, Mispalel Esrei. They say you take 10 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, you add on an extra bracha. Or Beis Hillel Oimrim, Mispal Teisha, you say 9. Because here you have a bracha you have the normal brachas of Rosh Hashanah, plus it's Shabbos, so Beis Shammai says you add on an extra bracha. So when the Musaf davening, you add on an extra bracha, and therefore there's 10. But Beis Hillel says, no, it's only 9. And Shabbos does not have a separate bracha, it's included in the other bracha. Now if it's so that you're saying that Rav Daisa says, that on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh has a separate bracha. Beis Shammai, Achadas Remi Boile. It shouldn't be 10; it should be 11, because there should be an extra bracha for Rosh Chodesh. So, don't we see over here that since they don't require an 11th bracha, that you don't require a separate bracha for Rosh Chodesh? He says, no, Rosh Chodesh is different. You do have to mention it. Now, even though Beis Shammai says Well, if you mention, you make a separate bracha. So on Shabbos, you make a separate bracha for Shabbos. Well, if you mention it, just like you mention a separate bracha for Shabbos, you have to mention a separate bracha for Rosh Chodesh. No, because on the rest of the tefillahs, where it's not Musaf and Mariv and Shachris and Mincha, Rosh Chodesh is not mentioned as a separate bracha. Your koiled, it's included in the other brachas, either in Yalav Yavai or in part of the chasima of a regular bracha. So mitoch shekoil shachris v'arvin, since it's included in the other brachas, kol nam musafim, it's also included in the musaf bracha. We don't have a separate bracha for the musaf bracha, even though it's mentioned, but it doesn't have a separate bracha. The Gemara, Omi Isla Beis Shammai hold of this concept of koilal, that it doesn't require its own independent bracha. It's just mentioned in the other brachas. We learn in the Brisa, Rosh Chodesh Echad b'Shabbos. If during the year Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, Beis Shammai Aimim Mispal Shmeina, or Beis Hillel Aimim Mispal Sheva. Beis Hillel says you mentioned 7. You mentioned the 7 brachas just like any other Shabbos. You don't have an extra bracha. But Beis Shammai says you do add on an extra bracha. So you see that it requires its own independent bracha. So kasha, it's taka kasha. You see that from Beis Shammai that they don't require an extra bracha, a separate independent bracha for Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. So it's taka kasha. It seems to indicate that you don't mention Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah.